Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Hustle on Purpose podcast. My name is GT Ikard, and today we have a very special guest and marketing extraordinaire, Randy Rankin.
Good
Randy,
morning.
how are you today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Excited.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, good to see you too. So like we normally start off, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and all of that.
Sure. So, been in marketing now for, around 12 years. It's kind of crazy when you think about how long you do something. We started out in real estate and eventually led to personal
Marketing
branding.
for real estate?
Yeah, marketing and real estate. We did a lot of listing videos and brokerage videos and really centered around branding and trying to, again, bring yourself up around everyone else, make yourself appealing, differentiate yourself against everyone else, that kind of thing. And we found some success in that and kind of got the opportunity to branch out into other small businesses and startups and more of a storytelling aspect of things. And again, just driving home the branding thing. Branding is really important no matter what we're doing, right? Especially the more saturated a market becomes.
Yeah, you got to stand out.
So that's a brief background, the short background for sure.
Yeah. So the listing videos and stuff, that was probably really educational, and it's more transactional. Like an agent hits you up, it's like, hey, I've got this listing. Can you make me a listing video?
Right. Yeah.
But would you say, like, what made you get more out of that? Just the fact that it was transactional and you were always needing more of that stuff kind of coming in, or it didn't let you focus on the longer format stuff and branding and really like the artistic side of it as much?
The truth is that video production is a luxury in Arkansas. We all know this, right? So people only use it whenever they can use it or they want to put bells and whistles or glossing up their product, however you want to look at it.
Right.
So listing videos, especially pre-COVID, were more about mansions, right? Like 500,000 plus homes, which are few and far between whenever you're, again, back then in the market. Right. It was just hard to find, a sustainable business model that allowed us to get value for the time that we thought we should be getting it for, if that makes sense.
Right.
And then we were also doing stuff on the side, and when you do stuff on the side and your value slowly, rises organically, it's hard to go back to, going to a house for 2 hours for $100, you know what I mean? And then having to spend, so again, most of the time editing is around 3.2 times whatever production is. So if we have an hour of footage, normally it takes Aaron 3.5 hours to kind of get through that footage and make something with it. So again, a 2 hour listing video turns into a 6 and 7 hour ordeal. And then all of a sudden, your margins are getting cut very, very thin. Right.
That's a full work day, and you can only have, reasonably expect somebody to do that 5 of those a week. And
so we started to look at that more of a way to contract work out, to try to get some cinematographers and some videographers that were just starting out, trying to get them, again, more access to jobs and more access to new opportunities.
Right.
And so we did that for a little while, but again, that quickly became the same issue with them because they started doing creative things with us as well. And, it's this big, you're just always going in a circle whenever you're a creative in Arkansas, where you're trying to do things as a business, you're trying to do things creatively. Look, we all have a reason why we're in production in some way or media in some way. And most of it is selfish. We want to scratch our own itch, so to speak, and do things that make us happy and fulfill us in some sort of way. Right. So
but you also have to take the client into account.
Right. So it is a battle, and
results.
It's been hard because we didn't really market ourselves because we always thought that we can just use this to fund this. And it's always been an apparatus to be able to do things we want to do. But from the outside perspective, that's obviously the brand aspect, which is something I always preach. It's funny because I think I just talked about it a few weeks ago. You know, Aaron says I have a terrible social media presence since I do branding, because I just don't focus on my own branding,
right,
you know, well enough at all. And it's just because, you know, once you know so much about the platforms and the AIs and everything, it gets hard to see it with rose-colored glasses and try to see like an organic, real, natural presence from everyone. So yeah, it's been a challenge of mine for sure to try to take my own advice, so to speak, and put myself out there in a way that is well put together and strategized to do, you know, X goal.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
You brought up a couple of really good points that I like in there. Like, I like hearing those entrepreneurial stories where it's like, man, we got into doing X with this plan. It worked for a little bit, but we knew it wasn't going to be what was going to get us to like the next step. So we had to pivot and change.
Pivot.
Pivot.
Yeah.
Makes me think of Ross with the couch.
Of course.
But you know, you just keep trying to do the next right thing, and you figure it out, and you do the next right thing and figure it out. Like, you can't get stuck in that being afraid to change or whatever. Like, once it's almost like poker. Like, once you know you have a losing hand, it's like time to let it go.
Yeah, you got to know. Yep.
And the other thing was too, like, even being in marketing, you get so busy working on other people's brands and other people's stuff that it makes it difficult to focus on your own. Like, I'm in real estate and like home renovations and all of that stuff. And like, I have a currently like a half-built fence at my own house. It's like, you know, or like if you're a cook, it's like the last thing you want to do when you go home and get off work is cook. Like, even though you're good at it or whatever, it's like, it's really hard to do it for yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
It drives my wife a little crazy because it's like, don't you do this for a living?
Yeah.
She doesn't say that, but like, I guess in my mind, if I was her, that's what I would be thinking. So I like project that. It's like our house, I renovate houses for a living, and our house is not done. It's been an active renovation for 4 years. So.
Yep. But you don't have to take pictures of your house and show it on social media. So
that's true.
That's a good thing.
The pressure is not there to like get it done and get it sold or get it rented out or
until now, because you've just put it out there. So now everyone knows and is going to want to see your weekly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is the fence done yet?
Yeah. But is the fence done yet?
Exactly.
Oh man.
But yeah, I like those 2 points that you made. So when you're working with these clients, you're helping them build their brands and all that stuff that you do. What does that kind of look like? Somebody comes to you and it's like, Randy, I have no social media, but I've realized the importance of that. I think my business has gotten to a point where I need to generate more leads, or I need to be getting in front of more people. I need more recognition, whatever it is that they're looking for. How does that look, taking somebody from zero to?
So it's kind of like the term, you know, once you get in a stream, it's never the same again. You know, it's like it's always moving. So like nobody's ever in two exact scenarios, regardless, right? There's no template of like, you come in here, we do this for you.
Right.
So the first thing is to figure out where exactly you are, you know, from an education point of view, from a production point of view, from a putting yourself out there. How comfortable are you on camera? How comfortable are you speaking in public? Communication skills, you know, all these different things that people don't really understand until the lights get turned on and I mean, you know what this feels like, right?
Yes.
Where you kind of start to forget everything, and then, you know, you got to go back to the processes. And that's why we tend to stick to those processes first, right? Fall in love with the process and don't think about the end goal, and eventually you'll make it, right?
Yeah. Because like doing it is just a big part of it. Like,
right. Yeah. Because you don't know how it's right. I mean, you just don't know how. If I were to tell you you're going to go drive the fastest F1 car in the world right now, how long would it really take you to be able to drive that car? It would take weeks.
Well, see, this is my problem. Just like with the marketing stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
And then put me behind the wheel and I'm like, what have I done to myself?
Right.
It was kind of the same with the camera. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I can talk.
But I think
Been
that that's
talking
a
my whole
really,
life.
I think that's a really good personality trait in general, right? Because,
Yeah.
and I've talked to my mom about this, right? My mom's now 70 plus years old and teaching. She's a teacher. She's been a teacher for 50 something years. I mean, it's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, props
and
to the
things have
teachers.
changed drastically just in the last like 3 years post COVID, right?
Yeah.
About her having to just keep up with all of the changes, all of the new technology. And I mean, again, she's a 70 something years old. She doesn't even know really how to use a computer very well, much less all of the programs within the computer, right? So it's a matter of like understanding that you're never too old to learn, right? You have to, because if you don't, then eventually, right, it gets, again, going back to that stream, you have to always be educating yourself about it. Because yeah, you get phased out pretty easily, and it's really easy to have that rot of reputation as well, where you get stuck in it and you just believe this is the way to go and this is everything. But then all this new information, as new science has come out, and then all of a sudden, right, you standing on that hill, you realize you're not saying the truth as much anymore.
Right. Like one of the most dangerous sayings in business is, why do you do something that way? Because that's how we've always done it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's terrifying.
Yeah. Really dangerous.
Yeah.
I feel bad for you guys in marketing, because I feel like that's a business where I guess there are some like staples that don't really change, like the human psychology aspect of marketing's probably a lot of that stuff stays the same. But when it comes to the technology side of it, there's always a new app. There's always some new platform.
Right.
There's always some new form of engagement that y'all have to try and figure out how that specific platform works and what people are looking for and how to engage with that. And is that mostly like a trial and error process? How does that work?
It's a testing process for sure.
Right.
Yeah. But going back to what you said, I mean, it's all based on psychology, marketing theory. It'll always stem from that source, right? So no matter what you're dealing with, just people are using different platforms or using different, whatever it is, mediums, whether it's paper, technology, whatever it is.
But they're still people.
But they're still people, and they still react, the same way we've always reacted to stimulus, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But that was the big boom in the 40s, 50s, 60s of learning what advertising and marketing really does. And we're just now kind of seeing the full circle of that, right? It's like the saturation and polarization of everything that started back then. So, all that to say, I should probably brand myself better. I should probably think about it a little bit more. But
you can ask me about my fence, and I'll ask you about how your personal branding's going.
Yeah, it's hard in a creative space to define yourself, and that's what it really comes down to, right? Like, we're creative storytellers, and we would love to do a lot of different things. And sometimes that applies to business. Sometimes that applies to entertainment. Sometimes it applies to educational information. Whereas with real estate, it's a very cut and dry goals, solutions, KPIs, exactly what you're going after.
Right.
Wow. Silence your phone, he says. So yeah, it's just a completely different industry. And it's like you said, like, I mean, nobody, all the entrepreneurs have the same quote. And it's like, if I knew what I was going to get into when I first started, I would have never done it. And definitely, right? Like,
yeah, probably so.
Definitely. But again, I'm glad we're here. I'm glad we've done it. But at the same time, it's like all of those lessons, those life lessons that you have to learn along the way there, you got to be able to take them in and be able to do something in your own life with them. Otherwise, you're not doing anything.
Right.
So,
So what, I guess, where I was going with what does the process kind of look like with people that come to you, and their situations are always different. But for the person out there that's got zero presence, zero branding, or maybe even a little bit, what are some things they could start going and doing right now? Like, let's say, because we talk a lot about real estate on here. Let's say there's a broker out there with a brokerage that needs some kind of branding, or an agent that wants to brand themselves, or a real estate investment company that wants to generate leads on deals, stuff like that. Are there kind of some actionable things that really anybody could start doing if they all just stick to it, have the discipline, and go take action.
So the number one thing would be value proposition. I mean, if you can't answer that question yourself, it's going to be really hard for other people to answer it for you. Why should someone want to do business with me
Right.
over everyone else?
Yeah.
Right. And if you can't answer that, then you have a real issue there. Right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to be some grandiose thing or anything, but it needs to be
Right.
something that you can lean into and that you can use to brand yourself so that you can differentiate yourself. Because if every single if there's 10 real estate agents on the market and they all have, whatever, mullets, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to be really hard, and they all talk the same and they all treat everybody the same. Like, I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, it's going to be really hard to say that, yeah, I'm going to pull more than this person's going to pull, or
Right.
vice versa. So
At that point, it's just kind of a race, right? It's like who
Yeah,
can get to the
exactly.
client first.
Right.
Because we're all
Which
the
is-
same. So who can get
then
to
it's
them first?
then it goes to your processes and your business processes, and what are your
Right.
business processes doing for you. So from a branding perspective, you have to attract, right? You have to attract people towards you. But then the big question, and what people don't answer, is like, what do you do whenever you do have them, their attention?
Right.
Right. So
Makes sense.
those two are the most important things, right? Number one, how do I differentiate from everyone else?
Value
And number two,
proposition.
what are the processes within my business that also differentiate me from everyone else, but more from a functionality standpoint?
And help you really deliver on that value proposition.
Exactly, yeah.
Because like you can go out there and tell people that you're the biggest, baddest, strongest, whatever, but then if you don't follow through on that, you're gonna end up doing the opposite of what you wanted to do.
Right.
You set out to make a good name for yourself, and you
Exactly.
ended up getting in front of a lot of people, and that's great, but then you couldn't deliver, and now you've got a big problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So, and again, just asking yourself those questions is how that starts. I think most people don't ask themselves the right questions, right? They just, like you
Right.
said, they get into the hustle of every day doing the same thing. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, right, your culture gets made for you instead of you making your own culture, right? And that can be very dangerous.
Right.
Especially if you have a larger group and a larger team, because we say culture winds up being the worst thing you allow, right? So if somebody, brings, alcohol with them and they wear jeans on Fridays and you don't say anything about it, well, then next Friday they're probably bringing 2 beers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And they're still going to have jeans on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an example of just how things can get out of control if you don't put places and processes in there to protect yourself, and then your company as a whole.
Right.
But not only from the functionality standpoints, also the branding standpoints, because all of those people represent you out in public when they're working.
Right. Yeah.
So sitting down with them and actually talking about like why this is important,
Yeah.
why the branding aspect is important, right? You talk about it all the time, right? Is it important for someone to see the big logo on the side of your truck and then go into the work site and see that everything is dangerous and everything looks like it just fell off
Right.
It's not a good thing for you.
Right.
And then my uncle has a saying, a satisfied person will tell one person.
Mm-hmm.
A dissatisfied person will tell at least
Everybody.
10, right?
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
you have to, and again, it's
Well,
hard
now
to not be
now
anal
it's even more because now they'll like,
on social media,
Right.
right? You blast. Yeah.
right.
So, I mean, I know it seems like you're being anal about it and that you're thinking too far into it, but those are the kind of things, unfortunately, nowadays that can ruin a business.
It's important.
Yeah,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you're also having to argue with these people online about how you're not that way, when it shows you that you are that way, right? So your words now don't mean anything, and then all of a sudden your
Right.
validity, everything starts going down the drain just because of one interaction that you had on social media, right?
Well, and honestly, just selfishly, like for me, putting systems and processes in place to try and make sure that vendors we have on job sites and people like project managers that I have here going out to houses and stuff like that act in a certain way is not only to make sure that people have a good experience, but also to make my life easier. Like it eliminates a bunch of headaches. And if somebody steps out of line, anytime you've got vendors coming in and out of all kinds of projects and they're stepping on each other and, you always have some overlap. The plumbers are there while painters are there and whatever. I'm trying to eliminate like the painter calling me because the plumber made a mess or vice versa, whatever.
Right.
Like you have to be monitoring that ecosystem so that it works better for everybody.
Yeah.
The happier the painter is with how the plumber operates and vice versa, the happier I am. Everybody moves quicker and easier and the house is better. It's just better for everybody. And like you said, what we always say is you're either actively training people or you're passively doing it. And it's kind of just the same way of saying what you already said. It's like you're either telling people exactly how you want things done or they're coming up with it on their own.
Right.
Because
same could be said for yourself as well, right? So like if you don't set out a process and a precedent to say this is how I'm going to do things, then what happens when you answer a phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Now you've enabled that person to know that you're going to answer the phone at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then they tell other people. Then all of a sudden you're having to answer 5 to 10 phone calls at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then you're going to bed stressed and you can't sleep anymore, right? So it's like what we used to think as being selfish or like unkind or like, when we were little really are just, it's laying out a process to where you can live your most fulfilling and productive life in a way, right? But to the external world, I can see how that could be viewed as a individual selfishness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's a relatively new thing that people can just get a hold of you. Right.
Yeah. I tell that story all the time, right? About like in 2000, right? If I would call my mom and she wouldn't answer the phone, I'd be like, oh, well, she's in the backyard or something. She's fine, right? Now, if I don't call her, I'm like panicking, right? I'm like, where is she? Like, what's wrong? Why is she not picking up the phone? Yeah. And so we have this saying where like with the evolution of technology comes the necessity of constant communication. Because now that I can communicate with you at all times, I feel like I should be able to communicate with you at all times. And the same thing is said for a business, right? So like if a business wants to communicate with you, if you've set out that precedent, then you can reach out to me at any time and you don't, right? Then again, that's that business that's not fulfilling an obligation to an audience in their eyes, right? So perceived perception, right? It's the way the whole world works, unfortunately. So yeah,
it doesn't have much to do with marketing, but it is, I think, good advice for entrepreneurs in general is like set those boundaries, make them clear, and stick by them.
I would say it's very to do with marketing, actually. I mean, because again, all your marketing is and your advertising is an amplification of your process, right? So like if you were to be able to do what you do and just tell someone, right, what it is that you're solving and what problem you're solving, how you're going to solve it. If you could do that with just one person, all we're doing is just amplifying that to everyone else, right? So you're creating a function that should serve the people, right, that are coming in. So whether you look at it from a functionality business perspective or you look at it from a marketing perspective, really all we're doing is input, output as many people and as optimal as possible, right? And then that's where you get into all the other tools. Like, okay, well then what is this audience like, right? What platforms is this audience on? Or, how are they going about getting this information? And that's how we break that information down.
That's that testing and iteration process. Cause you just,
how much education do we need, right? And how long does it take to get from point A to point B? Well, we need to have content in between to make sure we're driving them in the right direction, all those things.
Right. Yeah. Like my real estate buying company is not like a tech startup. Like there's not a lot of, it's like Arkansas Real Estate Buyers is like, just from the name, you probably know what like it's about. You don't have to walk a client through much education process. We can and say, the value proposition, why we're better, why we're faster, all of that stuff. But there's not an education like there would be on like, a new tech startup or some new app or something like that.
Essentially, there's two different types of people. There's people that take information and they take it for what it's worth and they run with it, right? Regardless of ever like diving deep into it and researching whether that might be factual or
That's
not.
probably me.
Right? So like we look at mediums and we look at different pieces of content the same way, right? So like there's going to be a lot of people that that get held up in ads, right? That are 15-second ads that are like shorts or like all this stuff that is very surface level information, right? And because that's how we attract people and that's why they work, right? And then you have more long form content like these podcasts, for instance, or even longer form content like 3-hour podcasts.
Yeah.
And think about the different details and the different pieces of information that you can get into each one of these, right?
Right.
So you can't really educate on a 15-second hype video.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens is you get kind of like half of these people that are there and they don't really know why they're there. And then you get the other half that are like at the very bottom and they've literally heard everything you've said on, on social media. So it's funny how you get those two. And that's what all these different mediums like podcasts have done for us. Right. Aaron and I were just talking about on the way over here. It's a way unlike any other time where you can really get into somebody's personality, right? Like an hour of a podcast, you start to break down as a character, right?
Right.
So like eventually you have to be genuine and it kind of starts to show through in a way, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are very many mediums that are like that. Even if you're trying to put on a show, like speaking in front of people in an auditorium or regardless of what it is, I feel like podcasts are the only way that there is a barrier that is getting taken down in some way or another. And it may be an interval where if after it crosses this amount of time or after we've gone here with a conversation or whatever it is, but you start to kind of get a more realistic version of them. And I think that's really interesting, right? I mean, I think it's really hard, again, knowing what I know about social media to validate and to trust.
Right.
And so from
because you've been on the backside of that production and you've seen like, I mean, they can even make me look decent on film and I'm terrible. That's why we like podcasts, that's why we like, because it's really, if you think about it, one of the only chances that you really have to be able to see through somebody. Right. So it's been cool for me doing the podcast because like I've always struggled with the people who ask me like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm in real estate. And I feel like with the podcast, even just in the short time we've been doing it, people are like, oh, like I get what you mean now. It's like a little bit more, even just being on like the hosting side of the podcast, I do feel like people know me better than they did before.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is nice.
There's no doubt about it, right?
Yeah.
Is how many people have gotten the opportunity to sit down with you and listen to you have a conversation with somebody else. If they were just to be able to do that from an observer's perspective without intervening at all. That's what people are doing. And it's a really interesting situation.
It is really cool. So do you have any crazy stories you can tell about
crazy
clients, coworkers?
Crazy clients. We probably have a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to
That's why this is my favorite part. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe even G this.
We'll get the
This is open for everyone.
The rating.
So one funny story, it would be one of our business partners when we first started the company, Sergio.
Dope name, by the way.
Right?
I wish
Sergio
my name was
Converse.
Sergio Converse. Wow.
Shout out to Sergio.
Shout out.
So he was the first to get his drone license because we were doing drone work.
For the listing videos mainly?
Yeah, for the listing videos. This is back in 2012. I mean, this was early.
Yeah.
And he was the first one to get his drone license and, he was flying the drone. So we went to one house, and this is, again, very early, maybe even like second or third house that we did. And at the time, we went in there like 3-4 at a time and just knocked them out because we had like this nice film equipment, right? That was so heavy. And so we had to like bring all this stuff. It was a big ordeal.
Yeah.
So we were inside filming one of the bedrooms, and the windows are open, because, again, we're trying to show
the lighting,
et cetera. And all of a sudden you see Sergio just like sprint past the window. And we were like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? And he seems sprint past this way again. And like, we're just like, okay, somebody go outside and see what's going on. And come to find out, he had flown the drone into the tree, and it was like still trying to fly out of the tree, but it was stuck in the tree. Mm-hmm. And then eventually it fell and broke. But it was just, at the time it was really hilarious because he was Sergio was trying not to make a big deal out of it with the client, with everything, but he was obviously panicking out there in the backyard, and there was nothing that could be done about it. And rest in peace, DJI Mavic. Or whatever that first drone was.
That would have been me flying the drone and just catch
Have
a
you flown
tree.
a drone before?
No.
Oh.
I would like to, but I feel like I would just crash it into a tree.
Yeah, probably.
It's just part of it.
I've been flying like at like probably heights shouldn't be at,
Yeah.
where like legit birds start attacking it. Like we've done land of like, you know, just like plots of land, right? Like
Right.
farmland and
Yeah.
stuff. And you have to get up so high that you can see the entire space. And
Right.
like, I mean, just there's footage of birds just attacking. Like it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like it's really scary because like you have a $5,000 drone up in the
Right.
air, and like you see the camera and like you see these birds and the thing falls like 40 feet and then catches itself and you're just like, just please
on the
land.
ground. They should, I mean, I'm sure they do this, but do they make them with like deployable like parachutes or something? In case it just,
I don't think so.
It
I mean,
has
maybe
some-
now, but back then, no. I mean,
'Cause
again,
it's-
there have been times where like we would put it up and it's like a mile away because of
Right.
again how high it is.
Right.
And then the battery starts dying when it's a mile away. So it's
Just
like dying, but it's trying to go back to the same place it took off from, which
you try to go catch it.
oh yeah, there's been so many. I'm sure you've seen the video of like, you know,
Yeah.
the guy trying to catch it going
Right.
into the water and whatnot.
Right.
But yeah, we used to have my truck and like put it on the top of my truck because we didn't want to, you know, if you go out into the middle of a field somewhere, you can't just take it off, you know, from the dirt because then it like
Makes a huge
makes a huge
mess.
deal and the camera gets completely dirty. So you have to like take it off from certain spots, and then those certain spots have like magnetic interference, and like it's
Yeah.
so much more than you would think it would be. And then
It's-
having to go
yeah.
out there and get FAA clearance, and then having to like,
Right.
I mean, it's being
Yeah.
a drone pilot nowadays. It's just, I don't see, because again, people won't pay for it, right? So it's like
Right.
the amount of work and the amount of like hassle and stress you have
Yeah.
to go through, unless you're filming something for, you know, some nice tourist
Right.
attraction where you're going to get paid for it on the front end. It's just,
Yeah.
again, another market that we chose to get out of just because.
It's one of those like things that like getting into drone footage, I imagine like when it was early on, it's like, it's a bit of a blue ocean, right? Because all of a sudden there's like so many great things you could film with drones. And it's like, as a business, it's like, man, this could be great. It's like we can get these great listing footage shots and all this stuff that wasn't ever accessible to like the normal person.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's talking about like different kinds of risks that a new business might face. It's like legislative risk is one of those. And it's like all of a sudden they were making all these deals where you had to get a license and get the FAA clearance and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then you have to pivot. It's just like that kind of stuff is going to happen, I think is the moral of the story. Like you'll never see it coming. It's going to be difficult, but you can be like Randy in his business and figure out a way to either overcome that obstacle or pivot into something else. And at the end of the day, it's just the doing needs doing. And you just figure it out, do it, move on, grow.
Yeah, I mean, consistency, routine, processes, they're
Yeah.
king, right? If you
Yeah.
just stick to those processes, you know, again, that's why I'm upset with myself about not listening to my own advice, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I tend to have the paralysis by analysis for other people, and it keeps me from being active within my own brand because I don't want to be challenged from an outward perspective, you know, on like somebody else's brand, and then them see me, you know, hustling on my own brand. I just don't think that's ethically responsible. And
Yeah.
I know like, and it's a decision that I don't make. Like I don't set out to make that decision. It's
Right.
just from a day-to-day perspective. That's what keeps me from doing that is like, okay, well, I'm not resolved here. So I don't want to go over here and change my, does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
I never want it to come off like I'm taking advantage of a situation. So I always try to make sure I am, focused on that.
I think it's an issue that a lot of business owners have with marketing in general is like, it's you need to go from working in your business to on your business. And like that is, you mentioned like the chasm before. I haven't read the book, but that is like a chasm that, I mean, I've struggled with personally, because you get so bogged down with the daily doing of the thing that it's really hard to work on the things that are going to make your life and your business better 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. And I think marketing in most people's mind falls into that category of, it's something that I need to do. It's something I'd like to do. I know my business would benefit from it, but I'm just so busy doing the things that need doing on the daily basis that, I'll worry about marketing when I get to here or when I reach whatever goal.
Right.
When really it's like backwards.
Right.
It's like, once I kind of realized that it was like, oh, like I need to start doing it now so that there can be a brand or there can be some recognition and whatever.
Exactly. I think Henry Ford has that quote that says like, a person that thinks they can have success without marketing is like a person that thinks they can stop a clock to stop time, or something like along those lines.
Yeah.
It's like, just because you think that you're making and I guess what would be a internal decision does not mean it's actually an external byproduct,
right.
Or whatever it may be. So yeah, it happens a lot, right? I mean, marketing, advertising is something that I would say people don't do very well, right? And it's not even like trying to be attractive or trying to be edgy or anything like that.
Yeah.
People don't do the problem solution well enough.
What do you mean?
What exactly are you solving?
Right.
And who are you solving it for?
Right.
Is something that I would say 90% of companies don't have nailed down.
Yeah.
Which means that they're throwing money in the wrong directions.
Right. Was that like the Coca-Cola CEO asked about, they asked him about marketing? It's like, well, we know we waste half of our advertising budget. We just don't know which half.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And back then, it was completely okay. Why? Because there was no validation or data, right? If you put something on a billboard,
right,
how are you going to know if those people came in for that billboard? Well, now everything, mostly everything now is digitized, right? So there's data and there's KPIs around everything that you do now. So if you're still doing those traditional things and you don't have a way to gain that knowledge,
right,
and like you said, pivot or be able to adapt to that knowledge, then I mean, I feel like you're really shorthanding yourself, because it's a really easy thing to set up. It's a really easy thing to accomplish. Most people just don't do it because, like you said, they don't have the time, or they don't have they think everything's okay. So if they think everything's okay, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, then,
When all those social media platforms and stuff we're talking about marketing yourself on, it makes me think of, they asked Ray Kroc, Ray Kroc asked this like business lecture, like what business McDonald's was in, and they all said burgers. And he's like, no, real estate. It's like YouTube, Facebook, Google, whatever. Like, they're not in the business of giving you a platform to share a picture of your dog or like a video of your cat or whatever. They're in the business of collecting data about you. And like you said it to me one time, is like, Facebook probably knows you better than you know you. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But your marketing now is in a position to be as targeted to your audience as specifically as you can make it.
Right.
So that brings back to what you're talking about. It's like, figure out who your audience is, who are the clients you're trying to serve. And the more specific you can get on that, Facebook will give you those people.
So I'll say one thing to that. It's not that Facebook knows you better than they know you. It's Facebook knows people like you better than you know people like you. So they don't know who you are as an individual, right? So they couldn't call you out. There's a lot of things around privacy right now where people are terrified that if they don't use a VPN, they can be found or whatever.
Right.
People have to actively search for you to find you, first of all, right?
Right.
So there's no way that there's people investigators that are just scavenging like your phone, his phone, my phone, right? It's a matter of like, is it possible? Yes. If people want to steal from you or people want to seek you out, then yes. But from a Facebook point of view, it's all about lookalike audiences.
Right.
So they're turning you into a number,
Right.
that is another number, right? So it's like they're trying to template you, and they're doing a really good job at it.
Yeah.
But it's not so much from a privacy standpoint where like they have all your information, and
Right.
so they do have
It's
all
more
your
like
information.
likes
Don't
and
get me
dislikes.
wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's a matter of you being an avatar of that data,
Right.
not necessarily being GT, right?
Right. Like they can go make an audience of people that are just like me in the form of, same age, married with kids,
Right.
like real estate.
And I think I've told you the story of
Yeah.
like Target being able to tell women that they're going to be pregnant before they even know they're pregnant based off of the way that their buying patterns
Wow.
leading up to being pregnant.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So again, if you take a sample size large enough,
Right.
you're going to find these patterns.
Yeah.
That is what we live in now,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't mean that
Right.
it's intrusive. It's just, it's such a big data pop.
The data's always been there.
Exactly.
We can just track it now.
Right.
Like,
and when you track data, you can make decisions based off of data.
Right.
So it's hard for me to say that, if 99% buy this, that they're going to turn into this. I'm going to probably assume that you're going to turn into this when you buy
right.
this.
Like
So
we're just able to notice those. We're just able to track it and make the patterns now.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So
It's
it's not
way
as-
less scarier when you put it that way. It's like that
Right.
data's always been there.
Right. But it is terrifying because of the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
Because of like, okay, all of a sudden you release AI to this situation,
Right.
then you're kind of talking about a different story, right?
Well, because you
It
get
becomes
into
more
like if
dangerous.
Target can predict people being pregnant, like, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but like the reason it's dangerous, the reason it's good is they might be able to tell who's wanting to buy your product.
Yeah,
Right?
it's not good for anybody but Target.
But-
Let's
but-
be honest.
Right.
Because they're selling stuff
Because
more
they can sell the
frequently, quicker.
person pregnancy tests or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Like you could just get the targeted ads but the scary part of it is like they could look at the data and be like, oh, well, based off of whatever, it's really likely that Randy's about to commit a crime.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you going to charge that? You kill the snake egg before it hatches?
It opens
kind of
up a
thing?
completely different conversation, which
Right.
is how do you, and I mean, we live in America, right? How do you deal with the masses when everybody's so different, right? So like vaccine was a perfect example. 99.99% may have a positive effect.
Right.
0.01 is actually a lot more people than we think it is, right?
Right.
So like same thing can be said for everything. There's always going to be a group of people that respond negatively or, respond positively or whatever it may be. But it's like when you really think about the sample size of what we have now and the data and the technology that we are able to use to capture that,
Right.
I mean, it's really mind blowing because I mean, it's really hard to paint a picture where everybody gets along. I mean, that's just the truth, right? It's because
Yeah.
if people can't communicate around their differences, and we know that there's so many different types of people that have so many differences, what are we going to do about it? And then all we have are these social media platforms that are hurling out terrible things from every side of everything, right? So
Right.
it's like, I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah,
Well, I think
it is terrifying.
I think my takeaway from it is if you can't beat them, join them kind of thing. Like this brings it back to the marketing. Like the technology is there and it's your competitors in whatever business it is that you have are either using it to their advantage to get more business
Right.
or they will. So it's easy to sit back because I've felt this personally. It's easy to sit back and say like, oh, well, I've missed the boat on YouTube or I've missed the boat on TikTok or whatever. Because it's like you see all these people that already have hundreds of millions of followers or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think I settled on, well, that's kind of the wrong mentality to have. It's better to start and work on it and try to get that competitive advantage for your business. And if you can put great information out there and help people along the way, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
But the takeaway for me is you need to use it and you need to market yourself is how this all kind of ties together.
Yeah, I mean, you have a choice, and I mean, there's so many different wars out there going on at one time, right? Like, which one do you want to be a martyr for, right? I mean, that's kind of like what I ask myself I know that seems very dark.
It is a little dark.
But at the same time, it's a good question to ask yourself. I mean, like, what hill do you want to die on?
When you only get one hill
When you only get one hill
so
to die on, right? So like, it really helps you focus on, because there's just so much negative news and energy and everything out there, and there's just so much that you can latch onto, and there's so much that you just can't as an individual.
Get out there and market yourself. Use the tools to your advantage, because your competitors are going to.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, the whole, if you can't beat them, join them mentality, it's very true. Either you can go live by yourself in the middle of nowhere off the grid,
right?
Or you can, which you can't really do business
right
out there in the middle of nowhere off the grid. But this is the way we get people's attention. This is the way we educate people now. This is the way we inform them of the problems that we solve.
Right.
So it's just a matter of, as that evolves, we will evolve with it, right? But that will always be our goal, to educate, to inform, to solve problems. And to visually show that before it happens, so that people will be attracted to it.
Right.
That's the only goal.
Yeah. People only buy from people they know.
Know, like, and trust, right?
Right. So if people don't know, like, and trust you, you're going to struggle in the long term. A lot of people might make it in the short term, but the long term, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. Unless you have a lot of money to throw at it, because unfortunately money does things, right?
Yeah.
People assume that, if they're,
right.
If somebody's in front of you at all times, in some sort of way, they get validation, right? So like, yeah, it's interesting.
I used to fall, and this is probably common, but when I was younger, it's like you see an adult that has, let's say, made it financially. Well, they've got it figured out, and they're a great person, and like they've only gotten there through hard work and doing the right thing. And it's like, then you get a little bit older, and it's like, ooh, there's a lot of people out there that like just have money, but have no real stance or like ethical commitments, or, they've made the money, but they've done it through nefarious means. And, so you've got to get out there and combat that.
Yeah. Which is like, again, it all drives to the branding issue. Going back to the branding thing, your why is just important as what you do. Right. And it's not just because you want to brand yourself well. It's because if you don't have a good enough why, you're not going to be doing this in 3 to 5 years, period.
Because it's hard.
Not because it's hard, because it has to fulfill you in other ways that are other than financially, right? Yeah. And there's a time commitment to that, right? You may be able to do something for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but at some point it's going to hit you, and you're going to think, my why is not good enough for me to continue doing what I'm doing. And that's why, again, in startups and doing what we do with entrepreneurs, finding your why is so important. And I know it sounds cliche and stupid and like in a branding sense, right? But
it's true.
It's more for internal. It's more for you to understand why you're doing what you're doing, so that whenever these things start to creep in, and they will, right, you'll have that answer to how you're fulfilling your life, right? So
right. Yeah, like I do this because I think my life is in a place where I get to talk to awesome people like you and have great conversations around meaningful topics. And that information can be really helpful to people like me that would have loved having access to this information 5, 10 years ago. Yep. So anything I can do to have meaningful conversations like this and try to get that helpful information out to people, then I'm going to try to do it. So.
And this is something that doesn't exist, right? An open dialogue around Central Arkansas real estate, from an idea of just trying to reach as many people as possible, to get as many people as possible. Right. Right. Like I feel like a lot of those little hubs are going to be popping up. And I've always felt like YouTube will eventually turn into more localized content, because there's so much out there that is on such a grand scale, and it's becoming more and more saturated, that I feel like we'll start to look a little more inward.
Yeah. Eventually. Like your local news is going to be YouTube based. Yeah. Yeah. Just
like storm trackers, right? Like is going to become the new weather. Yeah. I really believe that. Like over the last tornado situation, like I don't get on the news anymore. I get on Twitter and I get on YouTube to see people that are actually out there, right? Like not radars of the byproduct of what happens after.
Right.
It's like they're actually seeing it. It's really interesting. So,
and that's just another reason why people should
that's just
start
a
marketing
theory, actually.
themselves.
That's not something that's going to happen. I just think that will. I think that's the evolution of, again, all these things that are so national. They're so based on entertainment value, right?
Right.
So how do you differentiate locally to that, right? And I think you have to become more niche, more localized with your information.
Right.
To
Not
where
everybody's going to be
people care.
Mr. Beast and I almost just killed the mic. Get like 100 million followers or whatever.
Yeah.
You can still provide info
Right.
at your local level, and that's still
Right.
very important.
And you don't have to be YouTube or monetized on YouTube in order to make that successful, right? Make sure your goals and either your sponsorship or your audience segmentation
Right.
is just strategized in a way that it makes sense.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go out there, getting, like you said, millions and millions of views per video, especially when you're thinking more localized.
Mm-hmm.
Sell that localized audience what the localized audience wants.
Yeah, makes total sense.
So, and network.
Before we wrap up, I have a big problem that I need to talk to you about.
Okay.
Because I know you're into golf, and I've found myself in a position where I need to be good at golf by next Thursday. I've been invited to play at a very nice country club here, and it's with some potential business partners that I need to not necessarily impress, just not embarrass myself in front of. What do you recommend that I do in the next 8 days?
Call in sick, most likely.
Call in sick. Yeah. Maybe I'll get rained out. Do a rain dance.
I would say, what are you looking to accomplish here?
Not embarrass myself.
What does that mean to you? Does that have anything to do with the score? Does that have to do with your attitude?
I'm going to go buy a bag of balls from Walmart and take them with me.
So you don't have any golf balls. That's not a good start.
I would say,
Do you have clubs?
I do have clubs.
Okay.
My bar for not embarrassing myself is set on how many golf balls I lose in a round.
Sure.
I want to lose less than 5 golf balls.
Oh, wow.
Is my ambitious
very
goal.
dependent on where you're playing then.
Pleasant Valley.
Yeah, so you're going to have to hit it off over the water, around good
Yeah.
luck. The good thing about Pleasant Valley, though, is the rough area is still nice, so you can find your ball over there. There are many places where you'll go and it's just shrubby woods, and if your ball goes in there, you're like, no.
Right. I'd be I could find it.
You
That
should be able to
doesn't count.
find every ball that doesn't go into the water at Pleasant Valley.
Okay.
In theory.
All right.
So
That doesn't really help me get to my goal.
I'll tell you what, I'll take you out. We'll see how good you are
Okay.
at golf. And then I'll kind of try to I'll try to help you a little bit where I can, if there is anything there to be able to get done.
Okay.
But we'll have to see. What's your handicap?
I don't have one.
Don't have a handicap.
Yeah. How
I
do
would
you
say-
get a handicap? You just make it up?
No, you don't make it up. But I will say that I've been into golf.
What's your
but,
handicap? Say it publicly on camera.
It fluctuates. I got into golf COVID, obviously, because
Okay.
I'm a soccer player, baseball player, basketball player, football player, and
Just all
when
around
COVID hit,
outstanding athlete.
nothing existed, right? And so
Right.
but they still allowed you to go play golf by yourself, and so it was legitimately every day I was going to play golf. It was kind of
Right.
amazing. And I've learned that it's the perfect metaphor for life and business and everything, right?
Wow.
And it's because it has to do with that failure aspect. You're gonna fail
Oh, yeah.
regardless.
Big time.
Even the PGA Tour players fail. They shank a ball into the woods. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine playing golf for 25 years, never hitting a bad shot,
In
and then
front
on
of tons of
national
people.
television, you shank one into the woods?
Yeah. You got to recover.
that shows you how hard it is, for
Right.
instance. But yeah, just
and then you might
said,
have 12 more holes of golf to play, and you're I really got to
yeah.
recover.
Yeah, but there's something freeing, and then also the pressure about the just the dichotomy of those two things of
Right.
it's this fairly simple game. Got to get a ball on a hole.
Yeah. Easy peasy.
But it's we'll find out how easy it is for you later.
Yeah.
but yeah, just like having to deal with the shots. Like if you hit a bad shot and it's over there, you got to go deal with it, right? There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
You have to go deal with it.
Yeah.
And then the way you approach the next shot, like if you're thinking about all the bad things you just did,
Right.
it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse.
Compounding errors.
Not only that, but the compounding pressure, the closer you get to the hole. So the closer you get to your goal,
Right.
a 2-foot putt seems like it's harder than a 100-yard wedge shot or whatever, right?
Well, and the 2-foot putt is just as important as the 300-yard drive. Like it counts the same stroke on the scorecard.
Yeah. So getting into like the strategy of golf and trying to apply that back to my life was one of the best things I feel like I ever did, because it really helps me like deal with setbacks and deal with not just setbacks, but deal with successes as well. Like the best golfers ever, other than Tiger Woods, because he's an anomaly, I feel like you'll find that they have kind of like consistent demeanor, whether they drain a birdie putt
Right.
or they miss a bogey putt.
Yeah.
They're just the same thing.
Well, because they're on to the next hole.
Yeah. They're on
It's
the
like-
next shot, no matter what.
Right.
And it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, if you can apply that to your life, then you're better off, period.
Right. You're only as good as your last shot.
Yeah. But you can always be better,
Hit
right?
another
So like
shot.
there's books that say like if you're 200 yards out, for instance, and this will be the last thing I say about golf.
Okay.
Like if you're 200 yards out and there's any possible way that ball can go in the hole, then you should visualize and you should act like everything's going to come together this one time for that ball to go in that hole.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, the negative thoughts that you have that enter your brain
Right.
are literally worthless. They're acting against you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take that to life and to business and you think about that, why would I ever pretend like the ball is not going to go in the hole? It doesn't help anybody. You want me to be realistic? Why?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
really interesting to think about. So
Yeah.
definitely
and
I
like
would urge
aim small,
everybody.
miss small kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like literally like aim at the hole.
Yeah. So the aiming thing,
Well,
it's completely
yeah,
different because
right.
it gets hard, right? Like the more you aim, sometimes the less you are, because there's this thing about tension in your body. If you try to get something
Not me,
to go,
dude.
like if I'm over a ball and I'm
Loosey-goosey.
like, don't fat this, don't chunk it, don't do it. I'll do it every time. Because if you're thinking about it, it's going to happen. So you
Yeah.
have to go in. They say when you're over a ball and you get those thoughts, you have to back up, and you can't force them out. You have to let them just organically go, and then you get back over the ball.
That's probably why that will be tough for me.
Yeah, because then you would take like 7 hours to play 9 holes.
Right,
So
yeah.
I get it. That's why so many people are taking so long playing golf.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm on a bit of a time crunch to get good at golf. So if we're going to play, I think we should go do it.
You ready to transition?
That's where we're going now.
All right, and we're back.
We're back. I feel like I should like spray myself with like sweat and like have grass stains all over me and be like, oh, it's awful.
Take your shirt off and like put your hat on backwards.
Give myself a black eye. So what? Just the outro? Let's wrap it up. Well, Randy, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your marketing guru knowledge. Hopefully it's helpful for you guys out there. You can take this information to go crush your goals and help provide for yourself, your family, your business, and your community. This has been the Hustle on Purpose podcast. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, like and subscribe, share the video with somebody that needs it, and go out there and hustle on purpose.